I think in esports, the path to becoming that engaged fan is so fraught with friction, issues of toxicity, and issues where you can basically fall out of the funnel at any time in the process.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to what I believe is episode 20 or episode 30, I believe, of Visionaries. Is this one? I'm always messed up. This is a recurring bit, but it's not actually a bit. It's just that I'm an idiot. That we've had a couple episodes that get split in half, and so we count them separately, but they're really the same episode for the live people. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Glad to have you all here. We are joined today by Fishtix, a former one of the founding members of at Twitch. He joined Justin TV as one of the early employees for the gaming department there, and went on to be with the company all the way through its post-Amazon acquisition life for several years. He then left Twitch to start a company called Juked, which was originally a TV guide type for esports, and then pivoted into being a social network for esports. Ben announced today, sadly, that his startup Juked is no more, and that they're closing their doors after unsuccessfully being able to fundraise or find an acquisition offer. So it's rare, I think, that we get a founder to come on and talk in such quick wake of everything that happened. But I do very much appreciate Ben's honesty and transparency and willingness to do this. We had wanted to have him on the podcast more broadly anyway, given his background. But this seems kind of like the right time. So, Ben, all things considered, how are you?
You know, Jacob, I'm doing okay. This journey has been a struggle, as every startup journey is. But in general, we had come to grips with the fact that we probably weren't going to succeed with our original vision for some time now. So this has been in the works, and it's a really sad day. I'm heartbroken that we couldn't take Juke to where we wanted it to get to. But ultimately, in a way, it's a bit relieving as well, because we've seen the writing on the wall for some time, and we're here.
What comes next in this evolution of what you have to do with Juked in terms of kind of winding the business down? Are you going to be seeking acquirers for any of the tech, even post shutting everything up, or what is that going to be like the next few months for you?
Yeah, definitely. It's our fiduciary responsibility to do the best by our investors that we can. So we're going to be looking to sell the technology or whatever assets we have. If you've been following me on Twitter, if you've been following our journey, you know that we've been looking for an acquirer for some time. We did get quite a bit of inbound interest, but a lot of those conversations we were having were for a full acquisition, where I would go along, Chris would go along, the whole team would be part of it. And now we're kind of shifting our focus a little bit away from maybe a full acquisition and more into a tech sale, which, is not anything that any founder ever wants to have to do. But at this point, it's the way that we can have the best outcome that possible for our investors.
Couple follow-up questions on that. One, I want to ask you about what this process has been like ever since. I mean, even before you announced that things were kind of dire and that you all needed to find something kind of emergency to keep going. Before that, you wrote in your blog a little bit about knowing that things were tough earlier this year.
Yeah.
As a startup founder myself, it's definitely really important to me, the values, to just kind of be fully transparent with my team. I know that can be really tough, but what has that been like? Have you been telling your team sort of the updates all the way from the beginning? And what has it been like? Because it takes you placing aside your ego a little bit to say that things aren't working. And you're also risking demoralizing your team when you need them to continue to remain productive. And so what has it been like balancing that transparency with one, your own personal ego, and then two, trying to keep everybody motivated on the product in case there was an opportunity in the end?
Yeah. I'd say that, putting my ego aside as much as I can, I'd say transparency is a personal value that I prioritize a lot and have in my entire career, even in the early days at Twitch. If anyone out there remembers, whenever we screwed up or the servers died or we made a decision that wasn't the right one, my approach had always been to first of all tell the community like, hey, we screwed up, we're listening, we hear you, this is what we're doing to change this, fix this, whatever. And that was something we actually established literally within our kind of values documents. Jacob, I don't know if you're doing this kind of things with Overcome, if you have these kinds of internal documents where you're telling your team these are our values, this is what's important to us. Transparency is actually in that for Juke. And in general with the team, I don't know if this is the right way to run a startup, but for a long time now, we had been telling the entire team, this is how much money we have left in the bank. This is what our monthly burn rate is. And this is, the timeline that we need to do fundraising. So the entire team knew all the way back when we launched the Juke app, which was February and March of this year on iOS and Android. We were already at 6 months of runway at that point, which if you subscribe to any of the startup philosophies and read the startup books, there's a pretty common rule of thumb that says you should start fundraising, at least start fundraising when you have 6 months of runway left, if not already be into that process. So we already knew that we were cutting it pretty close, all the way back when we had basically just barely launched the pivot for Juke. In our weekly team meetings, we looked at our top level metrics and KPIs. This is how many users are coming to the app. This is what our retention looks like. Here's how many comments are happening. Here's the metrics that we're focusing on. And we also talked about the financial metrics of the company and the health of the company throughout the whole process.
You mentioned the fiduciary duty to your investors. You have a fairly impressive cap table, and I want to go over that just a little bit briefly. Some of your early investors included Blizzard co-founder Mike Morhaime. More recently, you brought on, in the past couple of years, you brought on Jonathan Shipman, who was one of the original engineers behind Twitch, so one of your former colleagues, and Kevin Lin, who is also a co-founder of Twitch and was basically the head of the Twitch organization while it was part of Justin TV, and then a very high-level executive when it spun off. He's your former boss. There are several other people in that org that were incredibly impressive, but you also did a crowdfunding round on Republic that basically brought in the public and had the public bet on you, and you had a lot of community support behind esports. How would you describe the sort of pressure and the relationship that exists between you and your investors, especially kind of reflecting on that, as I'm sure you have in these past couple of weeks, thinking about what might happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're a seasoned investor, then you expect that 9 out of 10 of your investments are not going to yield anything, and actually, most of the 9 out of the 10 will probably yield nothing at all. The calculus that venture capital firms have, and even seasoned angel investors, is that you actually really only care a lot about the 10% that return your money by 10x or up to 50x. So if you get one company out of 10 that returns 50x, it doesn't matter so much if 9 out of the 10 go the way of the dodo. So I mean, all of our investors were very respectful with this and understanding of the startup grind, understanding that you have to kind of shoot for the moon. That's what you're in the business of doing as a startup. If you're raising venture capital, even if you're raising angel investment to any large sum, you're basically staking a claim that we can build $1 billion business. And a seasoned angel investor isn't going to put 25,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 into a company expecting that they might double their money. You only really want to put that in if you have a reasonable belief that this company can 50x return on what you put in. So I honestly, we didn't feel a ton of hardcore pressure on a day-to-day basis from our investors. If anything, they were very supportive. They were great mentors, great at opening doors and making introductions. So nothing but good things to say about our investment, kind of any of our investors, including 500 startups or the angel investors that put funds in.
The next thing I want to ask you about that, though, is the part of a startup that comes with sort of identifying product market fit. And this is something that, in a way, we might disagree on, and I don't mean it in any sort of way disrespectfully, you've came and asked questions on this show. You've heard me talk, as I'm sure mentioning, and even in one of the early episodes with Atriarch, you've heard me talk about the way that I feel about the esports space, and it feels very echo chambery in a way that I think is very negative to the space. I got in an argument a couple of months ago on Twitter with Kurt Carter, who's an agent at CSA, who are friends of both of ours. And, my argument with Kurt was basically that the Esports Awards was a circle jerk. And I was saying that because they had left out several different nominees who were games journalists and don't cover our space, but did very valuable esports work, such as Mikhail Klementov and Cecilia D'Anastasio from Bloomberg and the Washington Post. And unfortunately, I think that there's, just anecdotally being a part of this, there is a set of people in esports who, as my grandfather would say, are high on their own farts, meaning like basically that they, it's not necessarily self-absorption, but it is a little bit delusion, I think. And unfortunately, like, yeah, you can be very supportive of the people in the esports space, but at the same time, you have to recognize what the that audience is very small. The people who are actively engaged with you, with me, like any of those companies, etc., that is functionally a very small number. And so when you were thinking about pivoting away from the TV guide, which I actually like sung the praises of because I thought it had like potential to be spun off and sold to somewhere like ESPN or somewhere else that could have really valued from the API of pulling all that match data and populating it and showing it, right? Like that is super valuable. Pivoting into a social network for a space that is very niche still to this day, when other things like Twitter, Reddit, etc. exist. What was that decision from a business perspective?
The decision to pivot from our initial product into the mobile app and the social first experience was, and I outline quite a bit of this in the blog post, was both I think a natural and positive evolution for the company and something that we felt was necessary given what we saw under the hood with the initial product. The TV Guide product, I'm very happy with how it grew in its first kind of 9 months. It grew completely organically. We never really spent money on marketing, and it grew through things like SEO really, really fast. But ultimately, retention for users that were landing on the TV Guide was really low. I mean, it was like it was essentially a media destination, and people were getting the information they needed. They were finding the streams that they wanted, and they weren't necessarily becoming long-term sustained users. And when you look at the startup and venture capital space, anything that resembles a media company is 9 out of 10 investors in Silicon Valley, at least, are almost completely allergic to that because it's an advertising reliant model and it's just not the sexiest model. More than that, though, for us, we didn't want to build a media company either. We were looking to build a community hub for esports. That was always our long-term vision and our long-term dream for the product. So we looked at we took a long look in the mirror and said, hey, look, monthly active unique users is pretty strong. It's been growing organically, but ultimately we're completely reliant on Google and SEO to get to where we are and to continue this growth trajectory. So we needed to figure out what the next evolution for the product was. And that's when we went to the drawing board and started talking to our users every single day. We did make a concerted effort to go outside of even our existing users, people who were Juked fans. We did make a very concerted effort to talk to just average esports fans as well, as part of that mix. So we weren't kind of, I guess, too incestuous with that. But yeah, so we talked to hundreds of esports fans and Juke users in one-on-one interviews. We conducted a bunch of different surveys in a variety of ways to figure out what that next step was, and ultimately discovered that the majority of folks that we were talking to and asking questions about the social experiences that they have around esports were just unsatisfied with the existing solutions. If you want to have a nuanced opinion and put that out on Twitter, that's not going to go very well 9 out of 10 times. If you're a nobody and you don't have a lot of followers, nobody's going to see your opinion anyway. Even worse, you run the risk of getting quote retweeted by Thorin or Richard Lewis for having an incorrect opinion and having a kind of a whole kind of following attack you. I mean, that happens to average esports fans who just put out their opinion into the world. So we kept hearing this over and over again. I mean, Twitch chat there's no meaningful conversations happening there. So we wanted to make a big shift and change what the focus of our product was, and so we eventually landed on trying to fix and improve toxicity and inclusivity in the esports space and create a more pure destination for true fans where you could actually meet other people who are just as passionate as you to discuss the meta, the Overwatch League meta, or is Faker going to win Worlds this year, and actually have a real kind of deeper discussion than what was possible on Twitch chat, on Twitter, and even Reddit to a great extent. That was actually a huge surprise to me, is that Reddit was almost viewed more negatively in the conversations we had than even something like Twitch chat, which I didn't actually personally expect. But the overall consensus was that these existing solutions just weren't solving this need for social engagement and validation around your passion for esports.
But important to solving a need is identifying how many people actually have it. And I think that is the biggest question I have for you, is in evaluating sort of the product market that exists, just not even the fit, just really truly the numbers, a numbers game here. How many people are engaged enough directly in esports to have that need, right, that you're describing, right? Or even want that need, because there's a difference between having it and actually desiring to get off the platforms that exist and go somewhere else. I went back today and I looked at the Republic campaign. I looked at the WeFunder campaign, and you're citing some of the Newzoo numbers and some of the other growth data in those types of things about the esports market. And frankly, and I'll say it here, the Newzoo's numbers are bullshit. They are the most misleading thing. They're nice to look at in a deck, but they are incredibly misleading from a actual engagement perspective. Because just because someone watches the League of Legends World Championship or the Dota 2 International or the Counter-Strike majors, etc., doesn't mean that they're actively engaged in the community that is esports. And I actually think that number is like less than 200,000 people. I think it's incredibly narrow, that are truly involved in English-speaking esports. And so I guess what sort of market research did you do before deciding to make that pivot?
Oh, well, first of all, I wouldn't necessarily agree that it's that small. That's pretty tiny. These teams, these players, these leagues have a lot of fans. I mean, I think there's 200,000 Overwatch League fans out there. That actually care and watch the matches and care about the meta. So
just to be clear, though, I'm saying that different from watching the matches. I wouldn't count the matches as necessarily caring. There's a difference between someone who watches Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football and Thursday Night Football and somebody who reads Ryan Russillo, right? Like those are two very different audiences. Making that jump is different, right? And so, but because esports is not so much at scale, the fact that those like people that just watch the matches aren't big enough yet, that get the trickle down number of people that actively, deeply engage.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about. That's the number I think is small.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I think the Newzoo reports are misleading when you say there's 500 million esports viewers. That may be true technically, and I think they say about half of that, 250 million, are considered engaged fans. That number is probably high in terms of people that really do want to consume all kinds of media, and this is a big part of their identity. I don't think it's 250 million, but that was actually, I mean, that was part of the problem that we're trying to solve. I mean, I think in esports, the path to becoming that engaged fan is so fraught with friction and uh, and issues of toxicity and issues where you can basically fall out of the funnel at any time in the process. So our goal was to actually widen that group, and I think while I agree that esports, the hype has been overblown, and especially in the mid 2010s, like 2015, 2016, 2017 era, the hype around esports was completely over exaggerated and overblown. But I also think that over the next decade, over the next 2 decades, over the next 3 decades, I'm still incredibly bullish on esports in the long term. So building a platform for a niche audience today, but one that we expect will continue to grow, is a viable strategy for a startup. In fact, it's part of the playbook is to focus on a specific niche when you begin and then broaden over time, which was, by the way, part of our plan. We didn't expect that the product would only be focused on the top 1% professional esports competitions. In fact, one of the things we did when we made this pivot was we took a long look in the mirror and realized people are discussing the game and the meta and how to get better, and they want to find other people to play with just as much as they want to discuss the top 1%. So while our focus was in, frankly, up until even today, we're primarily focused on professional esports. The plan over the long term was to eventually expand beyond just the professional scene and become a platform where you could find other people to play games with, where you could build your competitive gaming identity. And I think competitive gaming and professional esports get conflated a lot. If you talk about how many people play ranked League of Legends, Overwatch, Valorant, CSGO, Dota 2, then you're talking about hundreds of millions of fans, for sure. For sure, that's hundreds of millions at that point. So our plan was over time to expand beyond the initial niche of professional esports and into competitive gamers.
Other part that I gave, not you really any flack, but Jordan Fragan, who I do respect. When you all announced a few weeks ago that you were seeking an acquisition or you would have to shut down the company, she wrote an article where she did an interview with you, and there was one paragraph in particular that left this a little bit sore spot in my mouth, which was specifically that the problem that esports startups are having with fundraising is directly correlated to the economy. And look, we're in a terrible economic environment right now. It is a recession. We are headed even further deep into one. And I speak to people every day who like make investments and they're just like, yeah, I'm not doing anything right now. That's true. But I think that there's an extra layer of this that was not noted and was sort of blown off about what has happened in esports over the past 6 years, 7 years, which is frankly, there are a lot of people in this industry who sold a ton of investors a whole lot of shit. Some of them unknowingly, some of them for purposes of self-enrichment, and some of them, frankly, because they're delusional. And I'm not saying you're in any of those boats. I actually think you were quite genuine in your sell. And frankly, I respect the fact that every single valuation you raised, every single funding round you raised was relatively realistic, because a lot of startups weren't, and they just slapped numbers on a page and somebody paid for the number. Right. And so, again, I'm not lumping you into one of those categories. But when that continues to happen, when you see things like Vin, who are, raised more than $30 million over a period of 2 years and then blew through it all in about a year, not including sort of the early startup operations. When you see things like G4 more recently in that category of boat, but you also continually see these esports teams who still don't have the answer to how do they make significant money. When the top earning esports team makes $50 to $60 million a year, but are spending $90 million a year to stay relevant and to operate, that doesn't make any sense. And that has been a problem. Those types of margins have been a problem for 6 or 7 years, and no one's figured it out other than to get the hell out of esports and go do something else in gaming or creators or technology or whatever it might be. And so I really want to push back hard on that. And just from a perspective of like, our industry needs to take a little bit of responsibility.
I mean, it could be both things at once, right?
I think it is both things,
And
but I
it's
think
both things at once. And
the other one's
I
not
totally
mentioned.
understand where you're coming from. I will push back and say it is both things, because the market for any startup has just gotten much, much, much harder. But I think what you're alluding to is the fact that um, there's certain industries which come into favor in the VC world. In the 2014 through 2016, esports was the hot thing to invest in. It's been crypto, it's been fantasy and sports betting, it's been all of these different things over the years. And now, not only has esports lost its shine from where it was in 2014 to 2016, it has actually become anti-sexy to most VCs that we've talked to. And not even that we talked to, just 100% across the board. I mean, you can even look at these VCs that emerged originally. supposedly as pure play esports VCs, Bitcraft, Convoy, um, Griffin Gaming Partners. These are the VCs which have invested the most into esports over the past 6, 7, 8 years. When was the last time Bitcraft invested in an esports company? I spoke to someone who sits on their investment committee, and he told me that they haven't even reviewed as a committee. They have not even reviewed an esports company in a year. That's not even invested in an esports company in a year. They haven't. An esports company hasn't even come to the table. Um, so if the esports, if the esports focused VCs aren't even looking at the space, then it's actually almost even worse outside, because one of the things that has happened, which needed to happen, is all of the sophisticated investors have realized that the vast majority of value in the esports space gets captured by publishers and developers. This is not something that's new to anyone listening right now. This is incredibly obvious, right? Riot, Blizzard, Activision, even Valve, they're capturing tons of value, right? And it's really hard to make money if you're not one of those companies. That wasn't widely understood in 2015. And in fact, the market conditions have actually changed since 2015. There was a lot less developer control. MLG and ESL and DreamHack were more important parties. It was actually more viable to create a business in esports because there was less publisher, I think, control over the ecosystem. So we're now at a point where every single VC that understands esports, and that's all of them. I mean, every VC. I don't think VCs are quite as dumb as Ludwig does. I listened to your Ludwig interview. Most of them actually do understand the market conditions decently well, and that was necessary, right? And it was very much needed. That does not change the fact that I am still bullish on esports in the long term, and that does not change the fact that I believe there will be opportunities for startups, and there still are opportunities for startups in the space. Of course, I started Juked because I believe that there was a big opportunity here. So, but it is no stretch whatsoever to say that when a VC hears the word esports, a lot of them are turned off just right away. They say, "Oh, you can't make any money there. I invested in XYZ company, or maybe I didn't even invest in XYZ company, but I just know because all of my VC friends talk about it, and our analysts that did all the research looked at it, and it's really hard to make money in that space."
And they're not wrong, to be honest. I don't have the answer to all the economic issues that exist within esports. I think where we agree is that this audience is only going to get bigger, but it gets bigger when gaming gets bigger. Like, the player bases just have to be bigger. That's the simple solution. And I think that there will be a time when people who are Gen Alpha, etc., or have grown up with gaming their entire lives, that a subsection of them, that number will be so big that a subsection of them will carry the esports industry. But I think that the skis got put before sort of the Stokes here, and like everybody's just sliding down the hill and crashing into the rock at the bottom, right? Like that's kind of how I feel about where the investment landscape of esports went, frankly, is the fact that it's just the audience just isn't there to scale any of this. And it doesn't matter. I mean, you mentioned earlier some of the big esports teams. What are they actually a fan of, though, right? Like, they're a fan of often the creators nowadays that are assigned to these esports teams, not actually the players themselves. And there's a responsibility, and it's sad to say this, but like, there's a responsibility for these players to be interesting, and many of them just aren't. There are very few players in the top games that are like truly compelling from like a personality perspective. And yeah, you can say maybe that doesn't, maybe that exists in other sports. Yeah, it does. But at the same time, like, you look at any successful sports, even the more niche, and I'm using in air quotes for the video people, niche sports like F1 or, professional wrestling, like those things have really high characters. We're not talking about sort of basketball or football or places where they have LeBron James and Steph Curry and Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and sort of, the biggest people that are relevant to anyone, not just just people that are fans of football or basketball. Even the smaller niche sports have it, and a lot of esports don't. It just doesn't. There's not a compelling offering here, and there are stories that should be better told. It's part of what I want to do in my career, is to tell stories of the people that truly are compelling, that do sort of go past I play video games for a living, because that story is like old and tired. But unfortunately, I just think right now, like, what makes people a fan of an esports team is that they're a fan of a creator, right? Like, they're a fan of a creator who's signed to it, and that is not nothing to do with esports. Has everything to do with like gaming, entertainment, and creator space.
Yeah. And then you do take a step back and think about who are the biggest creators of the last decade. A lot of them were pro players originally, right? And, the cutie pies and scaras and ninjas and shrouds of the world got their start all as professional players. Which is, would cutie pie have become this giant streamer I'm a little bit dated, okay? I'm still talking about cutie pie. I know we're way past that at this point, but those, it was those, I think you're totally right, it was those personalities that put Dignitas on the map and made Dignitas so popular back in the day.
Yeah, and they've recognized this much quicker than most of the investors. They recognize that there was not like big money to be made here and got the hell out, right? Like, you think about Cutie Pie is one of the first examples of that. Actually, he's come up on this podcast twice this week because we had Cutie Cinderella, aptly named after him.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
on the podcast earlier this week.
Today
yeah,
I
she
learned.
said that. So, but I mean, even she wasn't an esports competitor, but she told us, huge League of Legends fan, and then realized at some point, she said it verbatim, realized at some point, like, when she starts playing video games on her stream, people tune out, they click out. And you're a former Twitch employee, so you understand how sort of funny that is the way that things have gone, that people don't want to watch games on Twitch anymore. They want to watch just chatting or IRL or hot tubs and beaches and whatever it might be. It's the gaming website is not really the gaming website anymore, at least in a way.
Yeah, it's come full circle back to Justin TV. Yep.
Correct. Yeah. I was a Justin TV user that saw a lot of that content back in the day, that and pirated UFC streams. So, nonetheless, I do want to talk about that a little bit, because the companies that support esports the most are places like Twitch, places like Riot, places like Blizzard, etc. And I do think that passion is really needed. And for big moments like the World Championship that just happened recently, or the Counter-Strike Major that ended last week, those events, like, they are totally warranted to have all that hype and excitement. But we've seen sort of even those companies check themselves on, like, how much are we spending day to day on the short term. And so what I mean by that, for maybe those unfamiliar, is like, they've reduced their investment in sort of the domestic regular season stuff that happens. So sure, they still go all out for the big events, but for the things that are happening a little bit more regularly, it's much more smaller. How do you think that impacts the ecosystem just outside of those companies as well, for places like Jude, for places like others, that, like, ultimately your success inadvertently is tied to the success of these publishers and other platforms and what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think rightfully Riot is trying to make LCS profitable, and I think they've talked about this quite a few times. They're trying to make their esports properties profitable on their own 2 feet. But at the same time, you have this messed up market condition where esports is also still marketing for the game. So I think I don't know if it's possible, outside of literally creating a startup within your company that's totally independent, that runs all of the esports. I just don't think it's possible to completely disassociate the two. So while Riot does want to make money on esports, and obviously Activision Blizzard with franchising model with Overwatch League and Call of Duty League are trying to actually drive a whole bunch of revenue through franchising fees and things like that, and broadcast rights, it's still marketing for the games. And that will, it's hard to imagine that ever not being at least subconsciously part of the calculus for these big publishers. So, I mean, you mentioned that costs are coming down and the investment might be going down a little bit. That's certainly true for Overwatch League. I mean, the production value this season was kind of crazy poor, in some of the cases where I'm sure folks may have seen some of the photos of like the Hawaii events where just they're in a small cramped room that looks like my middle school classroom, basically, with like low ceilings and stuff like that. Um, but I think one of the things that um, me, Jacob. I'm a forever esports optimist. I'm always cheering for this industry. I maybe look for the good signals more than I look for the bad signals. But one of the good signals I continue to see in the space is viewership growing every single year. I mean, it's it's like incredibly consistent. Viewership just goes up. I mean, believe the news reports if you or not, but you can look at the concurrent viewership reports from Twitch and from YouTube, and Worlds does. I mean, I don't think they've released their numbers yet for Worlds this year, but Worlds does better every year. TI does better every year. Evo and the fighting game community have had some rough spots, especially during COVID, but for quite some time, Evo was doing better every single year. And Overwatch League actually had great viewership this year. Maybe because of drops, maybe not. But on a macro sense, uh, almost every single top 10 esport viewership goes up on the aggregate. And then you have new esports games like Valorant coming out and becoming a top 5 esport within its first year and a half, 2 years. So on the whole, I am not concerned at all about these trends because I'm looking at the viewership number and it's freaking growing, dude. So yeah, maybe investment is coming down a bit, but I'm not too concerned about the impact that might have on overall viewership numbers because they are growing.
Two questions that I think you have a very unique perspective on. One is a startup founder, and one because you were a former Twitch employee and you had access to a very long time being able to look at the back end data. So the first question is about the actual audience broadly. One of the biggest issues that we have, and this affects startups like yours and others, is being able to measure the data of this audience in a nuanced manner. It is something that Twitch has had consistent issues with for, at this point, 11 plus years. The thing is about TV ratings and the way that TV ratings work is that you can measure all the way down to, who is this person? What is the account that they have signed up to with DirecTV or Dish Network or whatever one, right? Like, what are they watching? What are they interested in? How frequently are they watching it, right? And that data, some of that exists at Twitch, but the personality data, et cetera, doesn't. It's basically an educated guess, as I understand. Like, you have to take a little bit of a gander. Twitch doesn't age gate or many things. They're not asking for people's personal data that you have to have when you sign up for a cable membership. So how do we do a better job as an industry? What is the solution to better understanding who the actual audience is?
Huh. Great question. I don't think I have the answer. I will echo this as a concern in the industry because I think I mean, I've heard from many esports team owners, as well as the publishers and developers, even that there's a bit of a sense of anxiety of not actually having ownership of your fan relationship. Not that the NFL necessarily has ownership of their fan relationship through DirecTV, but they do get that data in a more robust and meaningful way. Um, but I think this is kind of one of the issues that esports has to overcome is that Twitch, Twitter, the ways, the places in which they are engaging with their audience, they don't actually own that, and the data, the resources they have to get data are oftentimes limited. In terms of what's the answer, I don't know. This was one of the things that we wanted to hopefully be part of the solution for in esports was understanding and being able to reach the right kind of esport fan. We were hoping to do that with Juked, and understanding more about what they actually engage with, what kind of content they like, what kind of esports, knowing exactly which esports teams are their favorites and in which order, and which games they follow. That was one of the things that we wanted to help provide in the long term. But I'm not a data scientist and not my area of expertise, but I do know that this is an issue kind of across the board.
And the next part is actually for the audience in this Twitter space and beyond, is being able to educate people in our industry that this is that these things are a real concern, and to collectively work as a group to improve them where we need to. And this is the other part. I won't say I scream into the ether, because I have a platform. I have 5,000 plus Substack subscribers. I've got 80,000 plus Twitter followers, etc. Like, I get fairly good engagement on my work, but I do find that a lot of the industry doesn't listen to some of the problems that we've discussed in this, whether that be, sort of willful ignorance, and they don't want to hear it because they are super passionate about something or whatever it might be. But I do think it's really important for the future of people's careers, for future startup founders, for other people trying to work in this space, to have a better holistic view of where the issues lie. And actually, I think it's almost better, because you could almost build a business in solving some of those issues, whether it be some of that data tracking, et cetera. So how do we do that? How do we better educate this set of people in the industry that work in this industry to, like, wake up, smell the roses here, and have an honest conversation about what's wrong with?
Well, it sounds like you're on the forefront of trying to get the good word out. So good on you. I mean, if I'm being super honest, a lot of us, you said, "Oh, I'm talking about this in general." Not you, Ben. Don't worry, you. I'm not talking about you. But I mean, if I'm being honest and looking in the mirror and trying to be as intellectually honest as possible, we probably overestimated the number of fans that fit this bucket of being so hardcore that they wanted to discuss every single match and every single tournament in a way that was less toxic. Like, we probably made some blunders as well that were based on us having blinders and thinking and just being so passionate, so excited, so optimistic about this esports space. Um, you know, I, I don't know the folks at Newzoo. I don't know how they get their data. I don't necessarily want to say that their data is fraudulent, or I'm sure that they have good methods for collecting things. Uh, but I mean, I do also, I have also recently, especially, come to think a lot about, like, someone again, like what you said, I think is actually pretty pertinent. Someone who tunes into the Overwatch League finals, that it looks great when you can say we had 400,000 concurrent viewers, and like we had 10 million total unique viewers over the course of a 6-day event. But those are not the viewers. Those viewers are not engaged on a daily basis. These are the tentpole events that you hear your friend talk. Like, everyone's talking about it, so you tune in. But that's not necessarily the esport fan that is going to buy your merch, is going to subscribe to your subscription program, is going to consume every bit of content that you put out. So I think you're right that we need to be a little bit more intellectually honest with ourselves about the number of people that are truly engaged in the esports space, and how we get there. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that all year, and writing about it, thinking about it, trying to, like, obviously adapt my business not to go through the same sort of pit holes, and, like, just make, hardcore esports content, because I think there's no money there, and frankly, I think there's no audience there. It's not even just a money thing. It's like, do people actually care about what we're creating? I just think the audience isn't big enough, as I said. And I went to the League of Legends World Championship a few weeks ago in Atlanta. The semifinals, it was a sold out event with 20,000 ish people, and I went as a fan, not as media. I purposely didn't ask for the badge, and I ended up sitting next to a like group of guys who were early to mid 30s. They were super hardcore League of Legends esports fans in 2012, 2013, 2014. They then had lives, families, etc. And now they play, like, League once a week or so together. But, like, this is the first sort of deep engagement they've had with esports in any significant amount of time. And that was just because, their sort of ability to get to Atlanta, a lot of them were from the area or from the Southeast in general. They were able to come to this one event and, like, see each other and have, and be friends and hang out and experience something. But they haven't been deeply engaged with this in 8 years. And I actually think that there's a lot of those. I think that there are a lot of those people that come back. I think there are new audiences that are coming in all the time, and they don't know anything, right? Like, I can't tell you how many people I've encountered who have no idea who I am. And, but if you were around in League of Legends in 2016 and 2017, yeah, you would absolutely know my work because of the contribution to the scene. But I haven't done that sort of stuff in a couple of years. And so people are just tuned out, and I'm not offended by that, but it is sort of, one, it's humbling, but it's also very interesting to think about like sort of, what's relevant. That's really, really, really important to me, thinking about sort of everything that I kind of called shoulder programming, everything that isn't the actual matches themselves, and everything.
Well, since you shared a anecdotal story, I'll share one as well because I found it kind of amusing and enlightening. Uh, I I've become addicted with like KonMari and getting rid of all of my old stuff, and I was selling something on Facebook Marketplace, and I went to go meet the person and sell the item, and I saw that they had a Sage from Valorant. They had a Sage kind of like dongle on in their car, and I said, "Oh, Valorant fan," and they're like, "Oh, yeah, huge Valorant fan." I'm like, "Oh, do you watch Valorant Esports?" And they're like, "Yeah, I'm a huge Sentinels fan." And I said, "Oh, are you watching their match today? Shroud is playing for them now. That's going to be crazy." And they said, "Oh, wait, Shroud joined Sentinels? Wait, they're playing today?" And I only pull this little tidbit out because this was like the biggest story you could imagine in Valorant esports. Shroud is playing competitive Valorant for the Sentinels, who are the most hyped team in Valorant esports. And this self-proclaimed Sentinels fan had no idea. And that was like, whoa, like that was crazy to me.
Well, you just explained both your product market fit and also the problem. It's like you got to be able to get those people. You can provide them the solution, but if they don't know the solution exists, finding sort of the nice, bridging the gap. Where's the bridge the gap? And I don't know the answer to that, right? Like I think Juked, and I hope it hasn't come off this way. I think the product in itself, the idea was really valuable, and actually like had, for the audience that it served, had a really unique purpose. It's just about, is that audience big enough? That's the biggest question I've been asking myself. Not just about you, but everything, like the entire industry. A lot of what people are doing. I've worked in media for a long time. A lot of the media companies are in the space, which we continually see fold and fold and fold. Right? Like it's highly concerning.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
well, I don't have to tell you, but the state of esports journalism has never looked more dire. It's really concerning to see that every single new esports kind of journalistic entity seems to go away within 3 years or less. Now, I mean, who's out there these days? It's Dot Esports
and
and
Dexerto. But the
Dexerto,
thing
yeah.
is that but what both of those companies have done that I think is really important to talk about, and Dot Esports is my former employer, and I don't say this with bias, I say it with data. Those companies have 15 plus million monthly active users because they diversify their content. They're not writing about the hardcore esports stuff all the time. Dot Esports does a lot of SEO optimized work that is like, here's when the new Pokemon game comes out, or here's the Lost Ark build. Like this stuff shows up when I search it, and they're there because they understand how to do that effectively.
Yeah.
Dexerto does that, but for creators.
Yeah.
And so when there's creator drama or anything in the creator space, they're the first people to be on it. So yeah, they do cover esports, but even they recognized at some point like that's not sustainable long term.
Yeah, that bums me out, man. It bums me out. I pose the question back to you. How do we fix that? I mean, how do we I guess it's just, I mean, it sounds like your hypothesis is just the size of the user base or the audience that is actually interested in deep editorial content in esports is just way too small. Um, but
I think it's a mix of that,
yeah,
but I also think it's a mix of going to where they are. And that is something that a lot of the outlets don't do. A lot of I have mixed opinions here, and I say this. I've invited them on the show. I want them to be here because the show is about people that are powerful and successful. But I look at like Esports Talk and now Full Squad and what Jake Lucky is doing, what Hunter Grooms is doing,
yeah,
and I have some critiques from an ethical point of view that I think are valid as a journalist, and I would not do things the same way. But what I admire about them as a business, what I admire about what they do from a content perspective, is they go to where the damn audience is. whether it be actually posting the stuff on Twitter and short form media to be able to share, or actually on YouTube. And sometimes you're talking about some of those biggest esports stories. They're the people who are providing the esports story in the right place, be it TikTok or be it on YouTube or wherever it may be. So I respect that they have, figured out where the audience size is, even if I do have some gripes with the way that it's produced and the way that it's created. But I really do admire that they found the lane, and I think that reading a website is not necessarily. I think some people do want to read, but it really has to be something unique and compelling. For as much shit as I've gotten recently to not do free agency stuff nearly as much in League of Legends anymore, my most read piece at Esports last year was not that. My two most read pieces at Esports last year were one, and I had a piece, by the way, about perks and a contract issue that got 22 million impressions.
Wow.
16,000 link clicks. You want to talk about big stories? The esports audience couldn't even click through, and it's But then I had two pieces that did 100,000+ reads. One that was about a scam artist who tried to scam people out of $30+ million in the esports space, and that blew up on Google, and people were interested in it because some of the big teams that they know are involved. And then another one about the Scott Williams house, that was about sort of everything that happened there, and talking to a bunch of the victims, and even Sky himself, and putting together the story. And so it's you can say whatever you want about me choosing not to do League of Legends free agency stuff, but at the end of the day, people don't care. They read the headline and they move on. And so I think finding things that are compelling, but also going to where the audience is, because YouTube and an editorial website couldn't be more different.
Right. I think Jake Lucky is an incredible, well, he's a beast. He's a beast. I don't know how he does it. He's like if Slasher was had meth or something and was just on 24/7, 7 days a week. I miss Slasher.
10 years younger and appealing to a Zoomer.
Yeah, I that's just me saying I miss Slasher. Please come back, Rod. The industry is better when you're around. He's never going to hear that, but I mean, you got to respect the hustle of those guys. They've really found their niche.
Yeah. I respect the work, even if I critique it sometimes where I think it's valid. But we are going to start taking some audience questions here shortly. I've got one more from Ben from myself. So if you want to submit those, I already saw that we had one submitted. Tweet with hashtag Visionaries podcast, and my team will have you come up and ask. We appreciate people tuning in, and we'd love to have your questions. The last question I want to pose to you from my point of view is, if you had to do things differently, if you had all the knowledge, and I ask every startup founder this, if you had the knowledge that you have now about the industry, about the product market fit and everything else, when you left Twitch and you started ideating for this project, what would you change?
I mean, the startup journey is the most condensed learning experience you could possibly get doing anything in your life. And I'm 100% confident that if I do ever decide to do a startup again, it's going to be a lot better in a lot of ways. Most founders fail a few times before they really, really succeed. And I think in a lot of ways, I was a good executive and a good leader. In a lot of ways, I was a terrible executive and a terrible leader. And I think a lot is going to be better the next time. In terms of the product market fit, and really the issue that we've been talking about this entire time, which is essentially how many people actually truly are passionate about esports and want to consume content all the time about esports and want to discuss esports every waking hour. I think that group is not as big as we had thought. And our strategy, there's a lot of ways that you can come up with an idea for a startup. You have to start with solving a problem. And it can be done through user research. It can be done through, some people just are I want to make a lot of money, and they're geniuses. So they think of the best way to make a lot of money, and they find these little holes to fit. A lot of startup founders start by working on a problem that they have personally. And that was our case, right? We said, I'm a huge esports fan, and I am tired of having to know exactly which Twitch channel or which YouTube channel the stream is going to be on. I am tired of having to go to Liquipedia on a second monitor to find the brackets and standings. I'm tired of having to find my news stories from just being addicted to Twitter and Reddit and social media. I'm tired of toxicity on these platforms. Um, so that was our impetus for starting Juked. It was trying to solve a problem that we had, and it was trying to build something that we wanted to see exist, because we thought the industry could be growing way faster if these issues were solved. Um, but I think we were, we are the 1% top most hardcore esports fans. We're probably the top 1% of the 1% of the 1% of most hardcore esports fans. Like, we have been following esports for 12, 13, 14, 15 years. Even before I followed esports, I was a competitive gamer. Like, competitive gaming and esports is basically my entire life for the last 20 years. So I think we built something that we wanted to see exist more than we built something that was a huge problem for millions of people. And if I could go back and start over, like, I'm still hyper passionate about esports. I still think, despite everything we said, I still think it's possible to create a successful startup. I think that there's enough people out there, there's enough problems in esports that need to be solved. But maybe I would have taken the approach of building a more general social platform for gamers and having esports be part of that. And in the login flow, say, are you an esports fan? Okay, great. Which leagues do you follow? Which teams do you follow? Still having everything that we have that makes up Juke today, but I think we could have a 100 times larger addressable market if we had focused on the total pie of gamers. I think another thing we could have done is maybe focus on a specific game first rather than going super broad. This is something that you read in every startup literature ever, is like, focus on one specific community and then prove your model. And then, hey, if it really works and it grows organically and you have product market fit with a small group, then you go wider, you go wider, you go wider, you go wider until eventually it's a giant market. I was like very stubbornly anti that, because in my idea, the niche that we're going for is esports fans who like multiple games. Because if all you follow is League of Legends and that's it, then lolesports.com is a pretty good resource. And it's 90% or it's 75% of what we had wanted to build. But if you follow multiple esports, that's when the problem gets much worse, for having to go to a million different sources, and you're missing matches, you're missing news, whatever, unless you're literally glued to Twitter 24/7, which a lot of us are, but at least for now. So I think those are some of the things that I think may have been roadblocks or issues for us. Is we went really broad. I mean, the original juke.gg website, we supported 25 esports games from the get-go. And that was part of our value proposition. Doesn't matter what game you follow, doesn't matter how many games you follow, we'll have it all. But I think maybe if we had focused on a specific game, we could have built more features and had more marketing tailored to that game. And then, as with the social pivot, I think I do think Discord is an incredible tool, but it's no longer focused on gaming either. So I do think that there's space for a social product for gamers, as much as it's like super cringe to say that out loud, because I've heard it a million times in the last 2 decades. We're the social network for gamers. I actually still think there's a real opportunity to do that. So maybe that would have been a better approach, and we could have still made esports part of our strategy, but gone a bit broader.
So we're going to welcome in a couple of different audience questions. The first is going to be from Ollie Ring. Ollie, go ahead.
Hey, Ben. Hey, Jacob. Long time.
Yo.
Yep. Ben, I remember meeting you. Oh, God, it was E3 a few years ago. Probably a long time ago now, but I mean, I don't necessarily have a specific question. I think I'm sad to hear about Duke, Ben. I think you guys have been really a victim of how the esports startup landscape has developed over recent years. Obviously, in my position at Esports Insider, um, where I sort of covered B2B for probably upwards of 6-7 years, you see everything from startups that are developing herbal pills for esports athletes, and you think these guys have just got 3 million in VC funding. Why? Where? How? And obviously, then when the macro squeeze comes in, you've talked about media, obviously. So what I've always said about media is esports is kind of an inverted pyramid of media, where most things get reported on Twitter and Reddit first, and then get rewritten by journalists. And when I say journalists, I very say it loosely. I'd never say that I was particularly a journalist. I just regurgitated uh, press releases and Twitter stories, and then that gets disseminated over content aggregation again. But that's very different from the way the normal world works. So the monetization and everything in media becomes very difficult there as well. Um, yeah, I think with esports there's just a lot of challenges, and like you said, is the audience isn't necessarily big enough, and that's kind of where it stems from. So, like I said, there wasn't really a question; it was kind of agreeing with a lot of what you guys have said and just added a few things.
I think that's a discussion point, though.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Ben, like you said, is the way we do it is in. I liked the product. What I would say is kind of where I look at. So, for example, obviously, I saw Jute from the very initial stages, and then I don't know how well you guys know James Duffield and Teams.gg that he's created, but that's the kind of social platform that I see. Kind of if you could get this amazing product, which is a almost a face it where you can meet people to play with. You can discuss, you can have everything aggregated, esports with gaming, etc. But how do you do that? How do you monetize that very, very niche specific esports thing? And I think now we're starting to realize and we're starting to see that esports is a word that a lot of companies have used and abused for funding. So from the betting space, Esports Entertainment Group, they'll be bankrupt very soon, in my opinion. eBet, they were esports betting technologies. They never really had an esports betting product. Luckbox came in, spent about 5.5 million on sponsoring Red Eye, never really took off. So there's a lot of these kind of people that come in and use esports as a buzzword, raise money, and that then scolds investors. And it comes down on the good guys. It comes down on the guys that are building a legitimate product for legitimate people. But how do you educate these people and say, oh no, these guys were nefarious. They never really had good intentions. And how do you then show investors actually this is a company that knows what it's doing. This is how they're going to monetize. And I think the key point is when you talk to these investors now, you need to really emphasize that look, esports isn't going to be an instant money grab for you, but if you build esports and you build millennial acquisition, customer acquisition of younger people into an overall strategy using gaming and esports, then you can build a successful business.
I have something to say about that really quick, and Ollie, yeah, we have one other question from somebody who actually worked for Duke after this, so yeah, the team's gonna knock you down from speaker, I think. But I actually have a little bit of a story about that. I think I've told this on this pod before, and I don't mind sharing this. I always try to be transparent and like walk the talk that I talk about. But I obviously run a gaming or a media company that our kind of entire skew. This podcast kind of oscillates between this and not, but our entire skew is truly to make gaming more accessible by telling human stories like that. That's what we're working on. A lot of the stuff that you guys don't see or haven't heard about, that's what's kind of behind the curtain. Is we're producing documentaries that are about human beings and that are going to be accessible to non-gamers, because we're not going to really focus on the game so much as the people. And I can't tell you the amount of times that I have gone into pitch meeting this year and I get through the entire thing. I explain the entire thing, exactly what that is. Okay, great. Here's an interest in gaming, that like relevant metrics, not just Newzoo metrics, but relevant. Like here's how Fortnite changed the landscape in 2018 and made more people interested in gaming more broadly. And here's what the buying market looks like from Netflix and Hulu and Spotify and these other places that are wanting to buy gaming content. I get through the whole thing and they go, well, what are your thoughts about Ben? And I just have to sit here and like sort of just take a gulp, because here's a company that did exactly what you're describing. They used words like esports. They used words like gaming to raise all of this money. And then everybody involved is really happy that they had a lot of money. And then they built one studio in Los Angeles that cost way too much money. And then they were building another one literally in the fucking World Trade Center, like we're in New York City, right? And they had to stop construction on it because of COVID. And that company went under. And it's like, you know what? My burn rate in the entire year is less than these stupid ass companies monthly burn rate. My entire annual burn rate is less than their monthly burn rate. And you're exactly right. It's been far too many people in this industry who's used the hype to self-enrich for benefit in some sort of way, and they have all made all of us worse for it. And it's tough. To answer your actual question about education, I'm sort of the opinion that like you truly just have to show it. You have to show it. And this is why I didn't lump you in earlier, Ben, when you were talking, why I said you weren't one of these people that I thought was disingenuous and dishonest about what you were doing. I mean, if you think about, and this is maybe where you want to talk about more broadly the market and the economic market, but if you think about kind of where things were 3 or 4 years ago, if you were in the position you're in today, like Juke would have gotten funded more than likely, because not only the sentiment would have been different, but also the economy would have been different. And, functionally, you guys aren't a late stage startup with a crazy valuation. You're still somewhere between early and mid. Like, you've done a couple of funding rounds, but you're not out there sort of asking for too much. And I think somebody would have taken the chance and at least given you a longer shot to make it right. And if it didn't work out in the end, so be it. It didn't work out in the end. But nonetheless, I think that somebody would have tried. But I think that so many people have misused that goodwill at this point in this industry that investors just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
So the only way to fix that is showing it.
Yeah, man. I don't want to come off as bitter in any way. I will say, if we had even a tiny fraction of the funding that some of these larger companies have, or not larger companies, some of these companies that ended up failing spectacularly had, I think we could have really continued on and made Juked into something special. And we've talked about some of the places that Juked maybe went wrong or could have done better. We've talked about all of that today. We talked about maybe our expectations for the size of the market wasn't right. All of that's true, but I also feel like we actually were very close. I mean, we had solid retention metrics by all standards. We had user growth that was happening organically. But my team was 7 people and 1 contractor. Shout out to Sean, who's here right now, who's been with me for the whole journey. We were a tiny team that never had any budget to spend on marketing. And it's not like we were going out and looking to raise $10 million on a $50 million valuation with, we had roughly 15,000 users or so with our mobile app. We were raising at an extremely reasonable valuation, considering, especially if you look at the market over the last couple of years. So, I don't want people to come out of this thinking like, oh, Juke was way off the mark or whatever. I honestly believe that we were close, because we saw signals that this was working. We saw signals that, especially with the users who engaged socially on the platform, I mean, retention was off the charts. These people really, really loved being part of the Juke community. I think I saw Captain Beans in the chat earlier. I'm not sure if he's still here. He was one of our most kind of hardcore users. We had users like him that spent an hour on Juke today, and wrote these super long, awesome articles and they were really, really valuable. So, and don't get me started on Venn, man. Like, when I heard the story for Venn, I was like, shit, I want to work at Venn. That sounds cool. And then they launched with literally 0 esports programming. Man, that really frustrated me. And then just where they decided to put their money and where they didn't. But if we could have had 2% of what Play Versus raised, where would Juke be right now? I think we'd be pretty far along.
Not allegedly defrauding Epic Games, I can tell you that much.
I haven't heard that story yet.
I reported on that earlier in the year.
Oh,
so
wow.
I don't mind saying it.
Okay.
So our next audience question is from Anton Ferraro, who is the head of communications for Valorant Esports. So Anton, we've we've known for a long time. Anton, go ahead with your question.
Hey Ben, and hey Jacob, longtime listener, first time caller. I'm kind of like here more so from like the esports fan perspective, less so than the Riot one, and as much as I can separate those two. I think like the thing that I kind of like we're kind of observing now is it's like the past like 12 years, you've seen esports kind of like rise alongside a flood of cheap capital, right? Interest rates were so low, there was a ton of money kind of flying around. The last time that we were kind of like in a situation that's like much more closer to this is probably like 08, 09. And the story that kind of comes to mind is Alex Garfield, who was kind of like this forgotten child of the CGS and then quietly ran around picking up sponsors or, top players, investing in StarCraft and nobody else did. Just kind of like going contrary to like what everybody else was doing. Again, like the hype at that point was basically like CGS, it was Halo, it was all those other games. So my question to you guys right now, like as the market is shifting, what are the opportunity areas that you guys see? Like what is the next Alex Garfield going to find?
Well, wish I had a great answer for you, man. That's a tough one. And also, by the way,
I kind of do, but it's not esports.
yeah, shout outs to Anton. I love chatting with Anton because we always go back at least 15 years in esports history whenever we talk. Which, if there's anyone in listening right now that actually has that scope and props to you. I think
I'll make it a little bit easier. I'll say like if there's like an area, like I don't expect a perfectly articulated pitch.
Sure. I'll throw one out that is esports because and it's also part of what I'm really passionate about in esports and something that maybe I'm irrationally optimistic about, maybe not. I think fighting games are about to go through a renaissance. Project L's on the horizon, but Street Fighter 6 looks amazing. Tekken 8's coming. I don't know if this was what you were asking, but I am placing a bet right now that fighting games are set for their best era of all time, and that Project L, Tekken 8, and Street Fighter 6 are about to be incredible. So whoever wants to really invest in those players and those communities, I think you're going to get a lot better ROI and bang for your buck than you might get elsewhere, at least in the early days. So get ready.
Yeah, well, we see that with RTS and Evo, and I think that you're right. Both are already trying to do that a little bit as well. I will say, opportunity I see more broadly in gaming. This is partly the work that I'm doing right now, but not necessarily. Is that there's a lot of monetization issues in the creator economy. Some of that is esports, some of that is not. I think I talk to a lot of different creators. Some on this show, some not, some in private. And I think that they just don't understand how to monetize effectively. They have these massive audiences, and they just don't get it. And, they're advised by people, sometimes represented by people that don't understand it either. They, maybe they're agents that have worked in other types of media, and they have their very specific way of selling what they're doing, etc. Whereas this is totally different. The unit economics are different. The types of way that you can monetize content against these people is way different than the way that you would do so in sports. It's not all revenue's not all coming from one distribution angle, right? It's in the case of like athletes, or in the case of celebrities, it's like, oh, you get paid to do movies, you get paid to do ads, you get paid to do endorsement deals. There are so many other opportunities out there for digital internet creators. And I don't think that half, probably even 3/4 of the creators understand how to properly activate on that. So I think it's some mix of like, I wouldn't start an agency from scratch, just simply like if I wasn't me, like I wouldn't start an agency from scratch with no credibility, because I think that's set up for failure. You do have to have that credibility. But I do think that there's a huge opportunity for someone who truly understands marketing and revenue driving and sort of digital creation to build in this. And you see companies like Night Media doing this really effectively. The thing is with Night Media only represents the tippy top, the people like Mr. Beast and Hassan and Carl Jacobs and the others. There are a lot of people much smaller than those guys who are very capable of making very significant revenue, and they just don't know how. I think there's a business opportunity there to help them do so. But we had one last question that's been a little long, but we're going to sign off with this one. I don't know if you want to come up and ask it, Sean, who is a contractor at Juked, but I saw him submit his question via the hashtag. You're more than welcome to. The team can invite you again now. But If not, I'll ask it for you. We'll end on a happy note.
Hey Ben, hey Jacob. So yeah, I worked at Duke. I had, like, from the very start. I've known Ben for 15 years. Uh, I suppose I can ask two questions, right? I'll ask my original question was like, what's been your most favorite moment on this journey, or your favorite memory, Ben, at Duke?
Yeah, I would say probably my favorite memory with Juked was when we went hyper insane viral in the Rocket League community. It you know, there was a span of about 5 to 7 days where like every single creator and like even a lot of the very best pro players all joined Juked and all tweeted to their fans to follow them on Juked. And it kicked off this trend where we got several thousand tweets of people saying, here's my Juke profile, go follow me. That's less of a sappy moment, more of just, I was like looking at our mix panel analytics like late at night, and I was just like, what is happening? That was the closest we ever got to product market fit. I think it was an insane feeling, and I think probably the most exciting moment of our entire journey so far. So it's less of a sappy moment. I think on the sappy side of things, hearing from folks like Wellgo and from Captain Bean, some of our hardcore users who like Juked quite literally, and in their words, changed their lives. And you know, a lot of these folks that really loved Juke the most were the people who weren't getting social validation in their fandom for esports. And then seeing that we actually really enabled that for them, and they made friends and they felt like they belonged for the first time. You know, them telling us that was definitely one of the most meaningful moments for me.
I mean, that's the best part about running any startup, I think, is, you know, I'm feeling this now. Like, it's, and I'm sure you all felt this too. New people encountering the work, appreciating the work, the positive comments, etc. There are a lot of negative ones, sure, but the positive ones always feel very, very good, and they outweigh the negative ones, 1,000 to 1. And so I feel that very personally too. We'll book in this episode here. Ben, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope the needling wasn't too difficult. You know that I deeply respect you and the work that you've done in all the years that I've known you, and the mission statement, truly. So thank you all for tuning in, and I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Thanks for watching Visionaries on YouTube. For more content, please subscribe to the Overcome channel.